really depressing ineffectuality and feeling like, okay, how many different ways have I tried this over the years, and no, we still haven't won, and it's very frustrating. So I guess, I don't know, okay, just being really pragmatic, I think the way I try to think about it is, the first thing to do, I guess, is to just try to analyze what are the systems of oppression around you and how do they manifest. And these are the really general, obvious ones, of course, in the universal sense, capitalism, the state, imperialism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, that's pretty general. But then more specifically looking, like, how do those manifest around me? What are the sites of intervention that are available? Where am I located in relation to those things? And then the second thing is, what would be the components of a social structure that functions without those systems of oppression? So then I think, and this too is over the long term, but how would we strategize along two tracks simultaneously, and one being resistance and the other being building alternatives? And I don't think either one of those things alone is enough. It's so easy to criticize either of them without the other. But either one of those things, of course, has pitfalls to look for, and I feel like when engaging in resistance, it is no longer enough to go and, like, let's take the streets, let's fuck shit up, let's blow off steam, we're gonna feel really rad, that's how rad we are. But I always want to ask, like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Is this doing anything to actively intervene in the functioning of capitalism, of the state, of any of those specific manifestations of a system of oppression? Is it doing anything to work towards its dismantlement? If not, why not? What would need to happen to make it do that? And one thing is simply to be more purposive. I feel like there's a tendency that's pretty prevalent right now to just be that rupturing the fabric of society as we know it is enough, to liberate your mind and your own practice, and to just kind of, like, just to bust out is enough. And I don't think it's enough, and I know a lot of people would probably argue with me there, but I just feel like there needs to be more of a sense of purpose, of goal, of what is this actually doing. And one thing, even though it's not always possible to directly instrumentally change something, I feel like there's an indirect way to also be really effective. And one of the things that I feel like is missing sometimes is communication of what's going on. Like, I've seen a lot of times just a failure or a neglect, one of the two, to really make an effort to get the message about what it is that's going on, what it is that's being resisted, and why. I guess the same thing, this is going to come back in my next thing too, which is, so the question of building alternatives. And I think the big problem there is, I think Josh alluded to this too, the issue of how to jump scale, how to jump from working in these little micro environments in which it's easy to kind of retreat from mainstream society and feel pretty good in your radical milieu. And the other thing, I guess, is how to sustain them. And this goes back to this generational issue as well. Like, if it's only set up so that it's a youth culture in which people enter for a few years and burn out and move on with their lives, and who knows what they do after that, it's not going to work. But I feel like if you are in this, if you have made a lifetime commitment to be like, no, I want to live in a different kind of world. I want this. I don't want to stop doing this just because, I've been around for a while, you get a little older, but there have to be other ways to keep going forward. And it doesn't mean no longer engage in action, no longer engage in radical activity, but do it better, do it smarter, do it more effectively. Because I feel like sometimes the only alternatives that are presented to you are either, if you're not satisfied with the way it's being done, you either just, that means you're now a moderate sellout and you just stop doing it, or you keep doing stupid stuff, even though you know it's stupid. Like, I don't want to do either of those things. I want to continue to push my radicalism more radically and more intelligently and more effectively. But just to go back to this building alternatives, so then I'm like, okay, so what are these alternatives? What would be these components? What would we need to do to create a sustainable, non-capitalist, non-state-based, non-patriarchal, et cetera, non-oppressive society? So I think, okay, we need to take care of housing, food, healthcare, transport, all of these different things, education. And I think this is part of the thing, too, for jumping scale. I was just having this conversation earlier in the day with some other people, just trying to think of like, what does it mean to think about collectives? How do you structure collectives that would undertake these kinds of things? So it's sort of fresh in my mind, but the functions of education, communication, and information seem so closely connected, because I feel like one of the reasons why, again, we fail to jump the scale, similar to the reason why a lot of direct action maybe isn't as effective as it could be, is I think there's a real need to share ideas and information and not just reject engaging in any sort of discourse with people who aren't already converted. And I think that what's going to make this compelling, what's going to make this convincing, is these ideas have to be more and more widely put into the discourse. And that doesn't mean like, okay, here's the gospel of anarchism and we're going to tell you the correct line and we're going to spread that around. I don't mean that at all. But just that the kinds of ideas that we create these spaces, as Cindy's mentioned, and we create more and more active and growing and viral spaces in which these are not so much these are the answers we've come up with, but these are the questions we're asking. I feel like that's even more important than coming up with the answers, to be framing things and asking the questions that are going to lead to a society that works along, in the broadest sense, anarchist principles. And I just feel like what is going to make these ideas convincing and compelling? There just has to be more venues, more sites of sharing ideas, of discussing and having the ideas jump the line into the mainstream as well. And this, I feel like I'm sort of circling round and round, back and forth to things that have been said, but this also connects to this question that I wrestle with sometimes about, like, what if you're in this as a lifetime commitment? What if you're not going to just kind of like go and, do some rad shit when you're a kid and then move on and get a job? Like, okay, what are you going to do? You either... And I feel like it's easy to come under a lot of criticism sometimes for, like, I work at a university. I hear so much anti-academic, like really vehement anti-academic talk from other people in my political community. And those critiques are dead on. They're absolutely correct about all the things that are wrong with academia. That said, it's like intellectual work is important. I think we should be doing intellectual work. I don't think it should be done the way it's done within the university system. I don't think that it should be confined to there or allowed to be commodified and co-opted into those kinds of systems of control and all of that. But what are you going to do if you are not going to drop off the grid and remove yourself from the capitalist economy entirely, which arguably is not the most effective way to continue to engage in the work of A, resistance, and B, building growing and functional alternatives? Okay, let's just say you accept the proposition that you have to make an income. It seems like, what are those people going to do if they don't like, completely drop off the grid? You work, are you an academic? Do you work for a nonprofit? These are all really compromised and often criticized situations, but it's just like, I just often throw out the question whenever I feel like I'm coming under a lot of criticism for working where I do. It's just like, do you have any better suggestions for people who want to remain committed to building upon their radical politics and directly engaging in the attempt to dismantle, the capitalist, statist, patriarchal, racist system, to create the alternatives to it? Do you have any better ideas for how you can sustain yourself with a way that's reasonably allows you the space to continue doing this work outside that system? Because if you do, I would love to hear them. I think that's all I'm going to say right now, because I just like, I would really like to hear, and I think all of us would really like to hear what you all are thinking in terms of what are these pragmatic ways that we can look with the long-term vision as a marathon and not as a sprint with a realistic intention, not to just get off on I'm marginal, I'm a radical, but with the real intention, like we could build this, we could transform a world into principles that are more along the lines of what we see as freedom and equality and justice. And take that seriously. I'm not so big on taking myself seriously, but I take those things that I'm committed to very seriously. So, yeah, I would like to hear anyone's thoughts on that.